All right, well, let's jump in here real quick in the last, it'll take longer than 7 minutes. Let's talk about some modern quests. If you turn the page in your notes. This is the idea of, it's not just archaeology, but it's history, the history of the Bible. And when we're thinking about these modern quests, we think of really 5 different groups of types of historians. The maximalist, the qualified maximalist, the minimalist, the Wellhausen historians, and then finally the convergence historians. I'm trying to think of how I can cut through this pretty quick. The maximalist head was Albright, the father of biblical archaeology. He was also the father of maximalism. Maximalism is this idea that the histories are written or simply summarizing the Bible. That's how J. Miller puts it. Who's at the bottom of your list there. They're just kind of summarizing. They believe the Bible. The maximalists believe the Bible. They believe what they find. They typically believe what they find. The paradigmatic maximalist history is that of Albright's student J. Bright. Note that we've talked about Albright, talked about Wright, and now we've talked about Bright. I like to call the wrong brothers, just because it's fun. They are maximalists, but they aren't necessarily high maximalists. This maximalist camp, you kind of separate people out. Like you see in my list, I've got G. Mendenhall. He's not a maximalist, but he's considered one because he believes old stuff. But there are certain things he says, psh, hogwash, and he throws it out. So just because somebody is a maximalist in your reading, as you read things, it doesn't mean that they believe everything. There's a separation. There's a difference between what I like to call low maximalist and high maximalist.
What is a maximalist?
They believe the maximum about the Bible, maximum amounts of historical accuracy, versus the minimalists who hold the minimal amounts of historical accuracy. So these are words that you'll probably come across in your reading. So a maximalist is somebody who's pretty much going to believe most of what's in the Bible. There are, as I said before, you can separate these. I was looking at the book Reconstructing the Society of Ancient Israel by Paula McNutt earlier today, and scanning through, and on one page I found the word probably 4 times. Well, probably this is true, and blah, 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 probably this is true. And so she's one of these low maximalists, right? This is, it's probably true, but it still might not be. As opposed to someone like Kaiser, who is going to just assume the Bible is true and start off there. We would consider ourselves high maximalists because we believe the Bible and we're looking at the dirt, and we're not going to say, well, the dirt says this, so we've got to throw this page out of the Bible. Or, well, let's take this paragraph out, or this sentence out, or no, that word's wrong. We're going to go with the Bible first and allow our biblical lenses to help us interpret the dirt. And the second group are the qualified maximalists. And these are those who, well, they basically qualify their belief in the history of Israel. Most of them are going to say, those first few centuries of Israel's history, that's all garbage. We don't believe that. But from the 7th century on, good stuff. And so they kind of pick up, and they're great archaeologists, great historians, great work when it comes to 7th century on. But for the earlier stuff, they really fudge on it, and they not too good. Some names that may stand out to you: Victor Matthews and maybe Israel Finkelstein. Finkelstein, yeah, he's a qualified maximalist. Now, some people are just going to call him minimalist, but he's got maximalist qualities because 7th century on, he does an okay job.
Are you saying 7th century on, 7th century
BC and yeah,
newer?
Newer, you're correct.
No.
Correct. Not older. So they're gonna, like we were talking before about these different ideas of how Israel began, conquest model, peaceful infiltration, rebellion sort of things. Well, really, they were just a bunch of Canaanites, and they were slaves, and they rebelled against their masters, and then they said, hey, let's start a story What do you guys think? Okay, we have a guy named Moses. And so that's the idea they're going to hold, something like that. Something other than the Israelites left Egypt and came in and conquered. They just kind of popped up out of the rocks. Well, not really out of the rocks, but... So we've got the maximalists, where I'm splitting up between high and low. Then we've got the qualified maximalists, who believe half, but not the other half. And then we have the minimalists. Friedman writes, there is a good deal of scholarly enterprise which seems to proceed from the assumption that the biblical pattern is automatically wrong, and that the first principle of operation is to discard it for something else. And that's what I was talking about before. This idea that, well, here's what the Bible says, so that's definitely not what we're going to find. Now let's see what we will find. Those are the minimalists. And we can split these up. I have their anti-biblical, extra-biblical, and then the nihilists. The anti-biblical are those... Did you like that word?
Do. The Nietzsche archaeologists.
Yeah. The anti-biblical archaeologists, or the anti-biblical minimalists, historians, are those who are going to use the Bible in order to generate contrary arguments. Okay? Wow. David, definitely no David. The extra-biblical minimalists are those who are going to pretty much ignore the Bible and then only try to reconstruct history from the dirt. Well, they're not even going to look at the Bible. They're just, or whatever that is. Let's only stick with what's in the dirt. And then the nihilist minimalists are those who are going to, again, ignore the Bible, but according to Miller, they are going to attempt to reconstruct Israel's history with no apparent evidence at all. It's just kind of makes stuff up, is what Miller says. The fourth view there is the Wellhausen view. Has anybody heard of that idea that Wellhausen, this is the idea that, like, you know, Genesis, Exodus, so Genesis is split up between the priestly guys did this, and then the Yahwists, and then all these different, you know, they read and they say, okay, well, this word was added in the 7th century, and this word was added in, and then they try to critique. That's the Wellhausen view. Have you ever heard that? It's something like that. It's pretty much dead. There are very few people that actually hold to the Wellhausen view. So I really don't feel like I need to talk too much about it. But they're those who they create Israel's history based on source criticism and not based on this kind of source criticism type stuff. The Wellhausen view has become so cut up. You know, it's not just the JEDP, it's the JEDP and this. They cut it up so much it's become can't even hold it in your hands anymore. It slips right through your fingers. It was really thrown out when we began to do literary analyses, and we say, well, you know, the whole flow of this book, there's a flow here, and that flow is completely taken apart when you try to piece together what was written in the 7th century and what was written in the whatever century, and you know, and so the literary analysis kind of killed the Wellhausen theory. The final theory, the final model, is the convergence model. These are those who, according to themselves, as Miller, J.M. Miller is the guy who I have this quote from. They approach the text with no preconceptions. We are unbiased, and we're just going to see what everything says. And then they try to single out the convergences, and then they remain skeptical about the rest. So they are the ones who say that they hold the middle ground. William Deaver is one of these convergence guys. And so you have Bill Deaver in his book, Who Were the Ancient Israelites and Where Did They Come From? He talks about this whole idea of a peasant revolt theory. And he's saying, okay, let's look at the evidence. Let's see what the dirt actually says. What we have in the evidence is, here in the late Bronze Age, you know, we've got Canaanite culture. There's no Israelite culture there. It doesn't pop up until Iron Age 1. Remember I said that before. RH1 is where you suddenly have this explosion of Israelite culture. These weren't Israelites, they were just Canaanites. Now look, it's all Canaanite culture there. And then he says, and let's look later on. Later on in history, we have got when we know Israel is there, they're just worshiping Canaanite gods. We can look archaeologically and see how wicked, and they were just normal Canaanites. That's all they were. And he says, see, there was no idea. There was no group of people coming in. You can't have that. And then we say, well, what do you see in the biblical text? You see the conquest coming in. They only destroyed 3 cities. All the rest, they stayed and lived in. They took the Canaanite stuff. Or they lived as nomads, and you can't really find traces of nomads. It's hard to find. So they took the Canaanite stuff. And later on in Israel's history, they took the Canaanites' gods. That's what we find in the biblical text. So in his middle ground approach, he says, well, the Bible is wrong there, but it's right in other places. But, I mean, the Bible is right there as well, and that's what we find in the dirt. So this idea that you can take a middle ground, I think he's fudging a little lot. I've talked a lot with a couple of guys who are students of Beaver, and they tell me that they have a lot of hope for him, that he's going to come around, and he's already come around a lot. So maybe he'll eventually come all the way around. Who knows? But,
He had an evangelical upbringing,
yeah.
and because of his study of archaeology, came to reject it. I think he married a woman and he converted to modern Judaism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's now a proselyte of Judaism.
Maybe we should send Alan Brown to go talk to him.
Well, we'll see.
I might do it.
So these are the ideas, and I want you guys just to simply be aware that when you see some of these names, as you're reading some literature, and you say, well, Victor Matthews says, well, hold on, who is that guy? Oh, he's a qualified maximalist. So when he's talking about the conquest, I'm probably not going to worry too much. But later on stuff, yeah, he's okay. Well, according to Davies, well, who is that guy? Oh, he's a minimalist. Who's Lemke? He's a minimalist as well. So you can kind of, as you're reading through your material and you spot these names, just be aware of who they are.